Hello, I'm Caroline Payne, and I'm a political science professor with a passion for coffee, by the bean or by the cup, as a source of energy, and most importantly to me, as a source of change. I'm going to talk to you today about something that I call 21st century colonialism, which I believe is undermining the development of countries all across the global South. In addition, I'm going to tell you about the Warrior Coffee Project that I head here at Lycoming College in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, where we actively reject this 21st century colonialism and its harmful effects. I'm going to start with a brief discussion as to what 21st century colonialism is. In order to understand that, we have to first understand the types of colonialism which have preceded it. So first of all, colonialism in its original form, which you're probably most familiar with, is a practice of primarily European countries that for hundreds of years forcibly located themselves in developing countries in order to extract raw materials for a low price. They would then take those raw materials back to the home country, turn them into finished goods, and not only enjoy them at home, but export them back to the colonies and sell them at a high price. Many people argue that this is actually the source of the inescapable debt cycles that we still see all over the developing world across Africa, Asia, and Latin America today. Colonialism effectively ended around the 1970s, but many people argue that it was replaced with something called neocolonialism. Neocolonialism is where multinational corporations replaced states as the extractive forces in these countries. In both cases of colonialism and neocolonialism, the populations of the global South were devalued. They suffered from a lack of transfer of technology and knowledge, and they were often regarded implicitly as the other, and more troubling as less than their counterparts in more developed countries. Unfortunately, 21st century colonialism is no longer a product of government or corporate action. With the ease of travel and the goal of educational institutions to make their student body more globally aware and help their students acquire what they call cultural competence, it has become a fixture of secondary and post-secondary education in the form of international service learning. What does this look like? In practice, this looks like high school and college groups going to developing countries and building houses that they're ill-qualified to build, leaving behind structures which are not built to stand the test of time, much less natural disasters that these countries often encounter. It's also leaving behind a still unemployed and underemployed workforce that actually has the skills to build those houses. It is well-meaning groups who cap wells with merry-go-rounds to make water extraction easier and give kids something fun to do while they're helping their families, but not teaching locals how to fix those things when they break, much less using resources that are sourced locally so that when replacement parts are needed, they can be acquired and can be used to fix the broken material. It's college and high school groups flocking to orphanages so that they can be yet the next group of volunteers to hug and play with children, only to also be the next group of people to disappoint them when they leave at the end of the week. Early on in my career, it was actually an orchard project where we failed to adequately vet our partner and realized far too late that he did not have the trust or the respect of the community. I came to this critical opinion of international service learning by critically examining my own mistakes, as well as those of others, in an effort to quite simply get it right. Because at the end of the day, our community partners and our students deserve nothing less. I met my community partners on a remote mountaintop in the Dominican Republic about 8 years ago. While there on a research trip, I was taken to a coffee farm, and on that coffee farm, not only did I learn more about coffee than I had ever thought could be learned, but I learned the importance of family and community and taking care of one another. They told me stories of who they came from, and through hard work, they showed me who they are. On that mountain, on that day, they left me with a question that really just came by observing them. And that was this: how is it possible that these people that worked so hard, that labored from sun up to sundown nearly every day, still, despite that, and despite the fact that what they were producing was a really valued commodity on the international market, they still were living in dirt floor houses. They were still cooking on 3 rock stoves, and they still had no access to power. And so when I left that day, I left knowing that I needed to answer that question and to find a solution. So it turns out the answer to the question was actually quite simple. The answer was they were getting paid as little as 8 to 15 cents a pound in the worst years, and no more than $1.50 a pound in the best years, because there's only one buyer for domestic coffee. There's only one competitive buyer that has an effective monopoly over the market. Additionally, there are very few exporters, and so it's almost impossible to get green coffee out of the Dominican Republic and to a market that can and will pay more for it. The solution was harder, though, both in its form. What was it that I could do, that we could do? And maybe more importantly, how could I include my students? And I knew that I wanted to include my students because I wanted them to learn from this incredible community. I wanted them to learn from the real world. I wanted them to be actively engaged in solving real world problems alongside real people that struggled each and every day. And so I, along with a very powerful and supportive team, took that call to action, and we answered it with something called the Warrior Coffee Project. A project that we conceive of as an alternative model of international service learning that actively rejects 21st century colonialism each and every day. That looks like what we think is a really creative endeavor. So first of all, Lycoming College purchases green coffee, or what is called unroasted coffee, from Dominican producers for a fair price. Most recently, that price was $2.80 a pound, a far cry from what they originally received. We take that coffee, and with our local partners, Alabaster Coffee and Tea Company, who roast it, we serve that coffee throughout campus and also sell it in retail bags at various venues. In addition to paying a fair price for the green coffee, we also make a profit from our roasted coffee. And so we take all of those profits and we subsidize the cost of travel for student groups to get to the Dominican Republic, where they engage in international service learning, and they work alongside the community of El Naranjito. So our projects can essentially be broken down into 2 main categories. For the long-term development project, students have been involved in a number of ways, such as using their research skills, which are skills that they do possess, right? Unlike building houses. They use those skills in order to help connect farmers with information about what the international coffee market expects, so that they can choose if they want to alter their harvesting or production capacities in any way to meet the demands of the international market. Those students have also collaborated with farmers by launching most recently a micro-lending program where farmers can take out loans to upgrade their production facilities so that they can improve the quality of their coffee. For our short-term development projects, those include things like collaborating with community members to ensure that they have a reliable water supply coming to their homes, working with a local entrepreneur to establish a Pico Solar program so that people who don't have power in their homes at least have some source of light and ability to charge their cell phones so that they can get information as needed. And then finally, exchanging effective pedagogical information with local teachers. Some of that might sound familiar. It might sound similar to other international service learning programs that you're familiar with. But we think it's important to note that there are 4 things that we do that are different. And we do these things in an effort to avoid that 21st century colonialism. First and foremost, we employ a sustainable model of development where the core of our project is coffee. a product that the community has the knowledge and the resources to produce exceptionally well. And they've been doing that for generations. In order to do this, all we're helping with is providing them access to an international market that thus far they've not been able to break into, and information so that they continue to be able to access that market. We're not giving them short-term giveaways that yield short-term results, which a lot of international service learning does. Instead, we're positioning them so that they are the source of their own economic development. Additionally, by connecting them to those other buyers, we're making sure that they don't become too dependent on Lycoming College. Things change. Sometimes we can't travel. Sometimes we might have a different administration to come in and have different priorities, right? So we have to plan for the future. And so in doing that, we want to make sure that if we were to have to leave the community for some reason, that we don't leave them worse off. And so that's really the heart of sustainable development. Third is the fact that we actively work to balance a community-centered approach with a student-centered approach. While learning outcomes are important, they cannot and do not for us outweigh the outcomes of projects for the community. We do this through the use of both formal and informal assessments of community needs. And following those community needs assessments, this means having very hard and involved conversations with community groups so that we can work with them to establish a priority for projects. So what should be done first and what can be held off on until later. And then also talking about how we would collaborate to foresee this project through to fruition. Before we make any commitment to a project, faculty and students have a critical period of self-assessment where we ask ourselves formally what skills we need and what knowledge we need to successfully complete a project and what we have. If we feel that there are some deficiencies, then we try to supplement our group with area experts and also do some knowledge building and some skill building in strategic areas. If that's not possible, then unfortunately we don't commit to a project. It is incredibly difficult to say no to a community in need, but we actually think that this has been an essential part of our success. We've been able to build trust and a positive relationship with the community because we're not willing to make promises that we can't follow through on. Unfortunately, they're far too used to broken promises when they work with volunteer groups from the global north, and we're trying very hard not to be that group. Finally, we're in this for the long haul. One-off trips to communities to volunteer where a group has never been before, nor do they plan on returning, well, those projects are not planned with a community in mind. It takes time and it takes trust, and that's just not possible in a 1 week or a 1 month trip. We have committed ourselves to many years, and we've seen that that is an effective approach over time. By prioritizing the community needs, we have built a relationship of trust, which in the long term has proven very effective at accomplishing our goals. Unlike projects that position faculty and students as the authority on what's wrong, we actually are empowering community members to recognize things that they want to change and then helping them figure out how to be the source of their own change, all the while teaching our students how to help them. So effectively, we're inverting the traditional power dynamic that you see in international service learning, which I think is actually really important. It gives students a more realistic view of the world and a more realistic view of their place in it. And most importantly, it refuses to position poorer communities as helpless victims and students as saviors. So over the past 8 years, we have accomplished a lot, but there remains a lot more to be done, both in terms of our program development and in terms of spreading the word about an alternative model of international service learning that we really believe in. So the next chapter of Warrior Coffee is helping spread the word. The next chapter for me is helping other faculty and staff who design international service learning experiences for students figure out that they need to concentrate and focus more on sustainability. They need to actively work each and every day to avoid dependency. They need to balance the community needs right alongside student needs, and they need to commit to a long-term relationship. In short, my hope is that I convince them to stop being perpetuators of 21st century colonialism.